some things that we have to think about when it comes to sales tax. In Ohio, I think it's like a 6.75 or it's a 6.25 now, but it's a little over 6%. So remember that if you're using 5%, so you can make yourself a little note. This is important right here to write down, that 5% turned into a decimal is 0.05. So like in Ohio, it's either 6.25 or it's 6.75. It might even just be the county you live in. But if we're going to use that mathematically, we would take this decimal and we would move it 2 over. Since there's nothing here, that's where the 0 comes from. And so that would be 0.0625. And this would be 0.0675. Now, if it's a discount, you use the percentage and you take it off. If it's a sales tax, we do the percentage and add it on because of the fact that they're charging you that tax on that particular item, okay? So it's really important that we understand how to do that. So let's just look at this example that they say here. So Corey bought a stove for $1,200. How much would he pay in the sales tax? So all you're going to do to calculate the sales tax is multiply by whatever the tax rate is. In this particular one, it's 5%. I think they use 5% down the page. And you get $60. So if you think about like 1% is if you divide that thing by 100. So 5% is if you divide that thing by 100 and then multiply by 5, so 0.05. And then you have to add that on because like when you go to a store and you buy, like in Ohio, they charge a sales tax on clothes. In Pennsylvania, they don't charge a percent on clothes. So it depends on where you're at in this country, how that's calculated. So let's take a look at how we do this first one and what you want to do for this page. Okay, so we're going to use 5% down the board for this. Okay, we won't always use 5% because, again, we might use some of that Ohio rate eventually. I'll let you know about that. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply 1350 times 0.05, because remember that's 0.05. You got to move that decimal 2 places. Now, I want you to always round to the nearest penny. Okay, so the sales tax that's charged, 1350 times 0.05, if we round it to the nearest penny, the calculator says 67.5. But when we're writing that as money, what's a better way to write that? How do we write that if we're dealing with money?
67 and 50.
Now, most of the time they are going to round to the nearest penny. If the instructions say round to the nearest dollar, we would go to 68. If they say just what is the sales tax, we'll take it 2 decimal places out. Just throw that 0 on there. So you always want to show 2 decimal places. So if you don't see a decimal place, throw that on there, okay? And then it says what is the total cost. You're going to take that original cost that Dan paid for his fridge, and you're going to add on the $67.50, okay? So if you add those up, use your dollar symbol, please. That's $1,417.50, okay? So all you're doing for this is calculating that sales tax and then adding it on, okay? So that's the first 5. Let's check if there's anything different. Okay, so now let's take a look at number 6 and 7 here. 6, 7, you know, right there. Okay, 6. It says, answer the following questions for each receipt. Remember that sales tax is only on junk food and non-essential food items, okay? So round off to the nearest cent. So it says fill in the subtotal and total on the grocery receipt, okay? So it says there's a sale today and everyone gets a 5% discount on all items purchased. What is the discount before the tax? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, there's lots of pieces to this one, so we have to really kind of consider what is taxable and what isn't. So first, let's do the subtotal of those things and put it to the side, okay? Okay, so if we add up those on our calculator, $3.99, $4.89, $2.59, $3.99, $2.99, and $1.89. we get a total of $20.34. Okay. But they said we get a 5% discount on all items purchased. So a discount we had talked about before, we're going to multiply by that 5%, remember, that's 0.05. So we can figure out how much they're going to give us off of these items. So 2034 times 0.05, rounded to the nearest penny. Now, this is what it shows, okay? 1.017. What is that when it's rounded to the nearest cent or the nearest penny?
2 cents.
Yeah, you got to add that and throw that up to the 2 cent. So that would be a discount. Okay. So the subtotal, the thing that's going to go here, you're going to take your 2034 and take off the $1.02 that they've given you, almost like a coupon. Okay, they've given you a discount. So 2034 minus $1.02, the subtotal is 1932. Okay. Now, they charge tax. Now, read the instructions. They didn't charge tax on everything. They did the tax on food, junk food items, and non-essential foods. So, if we look at this list, they would say that anything that's like a fruit, a vegetable, milk, cereal, these two right here would be non-essential or junk food. So only those two right there would be the tax. So let me give myself a little bit of room here. So let's just think about the taxes only on those two items that they're going to charge me 5%. So let's look at those items. $2.99 plus $1.89 is $4.88. And they're going to charge me 5% on that. So we're going to do that 0.05 just times that. And that would be, now it says 0.244. How does that round if we went to the nearest cent? It stays the way it is, right? Because the thing behind it has to be 5 or more before we round up. So the tax that they're going to charge us is only that 24 cents. That's all they're going to charge us. So then the total, you just take your 1932, add on that 24 cents, and that's your total. So the discount, this line right here is $1.02. Okay, so then if we take 1932 plus 24 cents, the total is 1956. Okay, so you have to be very mindful of how they've asked the question. What is taxed, what is not. Usually, as far as non-essential foods, essential foods would be meat, produce, bread, eggs, milk, things like that. So if you bought pop, if you bought chips, popsicles, those wouldn't be essential. You didn't need those to survive, okay? And then this last one here, let's just look. This time they said they're going to take 10% off. We're still going to use the 5% on the non-essential items. So let's go down the list and see what's non-essential. Non-essential would be the pop and the pretzels. The other things would be things that, are meal things and things that are better for you. So the juice, bread, and cheese, those wouldn't be taxed. Okay? So, you use 10% off of everything. You use 5% for your sales tax. Still use 5% for the sales tax, but you get 10% off. That's your discount. Okay? So that's all we're doing today, because 15 is going to take a while. It's a pretty extensive one because it kind of summarizes everything in the kitchen math section, which will be a test next week, 100 points. So that is our second unit test for this semester, or this 9 weeks, okay? So finish this up, take pictures of it. I'm probably going to go around and just tell you if you're missing anything, so that you can get those turned in as well.